The lights find her the way storms find the sea, sudden, electric, impossible to cage. On a stage washed in chrome and smoke, Grace Jones stands like an exclamation mark written in bone and steel. The cheekbones are architecture, the gaze a blade. Every beat lands like a command, every pause like a dare. For years the world tried to name her model, singer, actress, muse, yet none of those words could hold the wild voltage of a woman who refused to be arranged. They called her difficult. They called her dangerous. They called her uncontrollable. But the truth is simpler and sharper. She would not surrender authorship of herself. In an industry built on compliance, she treated obedience as a costume she would never wear. Behind the flash bulbs and the thunder of applause lay contracts, hands, and cameras that reached too far. She stepped past them and made a stage of defiance. What happens to a legend when the only rule she accepts is her own? Before she became a myth carved in chrome, Grace Beverly Jones was a girl from Spanish Town, Jamaica, raised in strict faith, in a home where silence meant survival and rebellion was punished by prayer and pain. When she arrived in New York in the late 1960s, she carried nothing but her body, tall, sharp, sculptural, and an instinct that refused to bend. The city was alive with disco and danger, and she became its reflection, fierce, unblinking, magnetic. From the runways of Paris to the chaos of Studio 54, Grace was not just seen, she was felt. Every performance was a confrontation, every photo a declaration that gender, color, and conformity were illusions. She turned herself into living art, an androgynous silhouette that mocked beauty's boundaries. Yet the same world that worshipped her image tried to shape it. Managers called her unmanageable. Directors called her too intense. Record executives cut her songs to make her more feminine. But Grace Jones was never made to fit inside a frame. She was the frame itself, bending light around her will. The cameras adored her, the tabloids feared her, and the industry whispered one word again and again: control. Behind the sequins and the spotlight, another question flickered: what does the world do with a woman it cannot own? Grace Jones was born in 1,948 inches Spanish Town, Jamaica, a place of music and faith, but also of fear. Her childhood was ruled by discipline so severe that love felt like silence. Her step-grandfather, a Pentecostal preacher, demanded obedience. His punishments shaped the rhythm of her rage. In those early years, Grace learned that to survive meant to perform. When she arrived in New York at 17, the city was noise and neon, a pulse she could finally move to. Modeling came first. Her face was too sharp, her skin too dark, her frame too fierce for the fashion of the time, yet that difference became her power. Paris noticed what America ignored. Yves Saint Laurent, Kenzo, and Claude Montana saw not a model, but a force. The 1,970 seconds made her an icon of contradiction, masculine yet feminine, African yet futuristic, raw yet refined. Under the lights of Studio 54, Grace didn't dance, she commanded. The crowd bent to her rhythm. She was no longer the quiet girl from Jamaica. She was the storm New York had been waiting for. "If beauty had rules," she once said, "I came to break them." The rise of Grace Jones wasn't a climb, it was an explosion. But the explosion left debris. The world loved her image but not her truth. The men behind cameras and contracts wanted Grace, but only the version they could sell. The record executives demanded a softer sound. Photographers asked her to smile. Directors wanted her to obey their angles. She refused. Each act of defiance added to her legend and her isolation. The media called her uncontrollable. Talk show hosts provoked her for ratings, until one night, live on television, she slapped a journalist who wouldn't stop interrupting her. The headlines called it madness. To Grace, it was boundary. Fame became a cage of mirrors. Everyone saw reflections of what they wanted her to be. None saw the person inside. And yet, she fed off it. Power, performance, rebellion, they were her survival. But the more she fought to stay free, the more the industry tried to tame her. To them, she said later, I was art they wanted to own. Behind the glitz was exhaustion and the quiet ache of being misunderstood. By the late 80 seconds, the disco lights dimmed. New icons rose, borrowing her blueprint but leaving her name behind. Labels grew distant. Invitations stopped coming. The tabloids that once praised her now mocked her rage. Her relationships fractured. Jean-Paul Goude, the photographer and lover who shaped many of her most iconic images, became both muse and mirror. He captured her as untamed power, yet his lens, too, tried to define her. Their love was art, but also control. When the spotlight cooled, Grace turned inward. The woman who had once owned every stage began to vanish between continents, Jamaica, Paris, New York, never staying long enough to be found. She poured her fury into writing her memoirs, defying even her book's title, I'll never write my memoirs. Even the wild, she wrote, get tired of fighting cages. The fall was not sudden, it was a slow, deliberate fade. Grace Jones did not disappear, she withdrew. From the industry, from interviews, from everything that once demanded her energy. In her 60s, she performed again, fierce as ever, body painted in silver, voice vibrating with the same dangerous beauty. But her home was no longer the stage. It was Jamaica, in a house overlooking the sea. There, she painted, gardened, and laughed only when she wished to. No manager, no label, no script. The woman once called uncontrollable had finally chosen control her own. The cameras that once chased her now waited. Grace appeared only when she decided to, and when she did, the world remembered why it could never forget her. I didn't fade, she said once, smiling. I just stopped performing for the world. Grace Jones changed what fame could look like. Before Madonna, before Lady Gaga, before Rihanna, there was Grace. She turned androgyny into art, fear into armor, and rebellion into rhythm. Her influence still breathes through music videos, fashion shows, and every performer who dares to be too much. She made the industry confront its fear of power that didn't need permission. Decades later, when asked if she regrets her defiance, she only laughed. Why would I regret surviving? Grace Jones remains more than a name. She is a movement, a mirror, and a warning. The wild cannot be owned. In the end, Grace Jones stands as both prophecy and proof that art born from defiance never truly dies. The world that once tried to shape her ended up reshaped by her fire. She turned rejection into armor and isolation into legend. Hers was not a story of rebellion for rebellion's sake, but of existence as resistance, a woman who refused to become a shadow in someone else's light. For every artist who was told to soften, for every woman told to shrink, Grace became the thunder that said no. She exposed the hypocrisy of fame, the way it worships originality, then punishes it for not conforming. She was the mirror that forced the industry to see its reflection. Powerful, exploitative, afraid. Grace Jones didn't just perform music or fashion, she performed freedom. Every scream, every slap, every unapologetic glare was her language of survival. And though decades have passed, the echo of that voice still lingers in every stage light and flashbulb that dares to touch the wild. The untamed never die quietly. They leave trails of sound and color that refuse to fade. Every legend carries a price, and Grace Jones paid hers with freedom. She was the storm the world tried to name, the mirror it tried to turn away from. Yet even now, when the lights fade and the noise falls silent, her silhouette still cuts through time, fierce, untamed, unbroken. What do you think? Was she too wild for the world, or was the world too small for her? Tell us your thoughts below, and let her story spark the conversation she always demanded, about art, power, and the courage to be unapologetically yourself. If you were moved by her fire, her fight, and her legacy, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of brilliance and darkness behind the stars we thought we knew.